Welcome into Outkick the Show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope you guys are having fantastic Tuesdays wherever you may be across this great nation or this great world. We got a lot of stories to get to, and we got a lot of cranking to do here before I have to hop off and go do Lock It In. So again, I hope you guys are having fantastic Tuesdays. Let's dive right into it. Couple of big stories in the NFL off the jump here. Cam Newton has been placed on injured reserve and will not play for the rest of the year. This means it is Kyle Allen's team for the final 8 games of the season in Carolina. Big news here, I believe, is that this likely spells the end of Cam Newton's tenure with the Carolina Panthers. They have 1 year remaining on his deal, paying him $18 million. I think it's likely that he is cut, and as a result, he's going to be a free agent. And the question that will be out there is, who is interested in bringing in Cam Newton, and also how much does Cam Newton have left as his overall NFL value continues to plummet? Now, we know there are several teams that will be in the market for a quarterback. In particular, I think it's likely that certainly the Bengals, the Dolphins, among others at the top of the list are in the market for a quarterback. Probably a good chance that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that the Tennessee Titans, there are several different teams that are going to be moving into the next year and don't necessarily have a quarterback under contract. Who could potentially be unrestricted free agents? The Bears might also be in the market for a quarterback. Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, I believe Teddy Bridgewater. There are a lot of different storylines out there moving forward. The question is, does anyone believe that Cam Newton is 100% their starting quarterback next year? I'm not sure I buy into it. I'm not sure I buy anyone being willing to pay Cam Newton starter money in this league, aka $20 million plus, meaning this could be the end of Cam Newton's career. It's happened quickly, and he's still relatively young, but I'm not sure that Cam Newton is the kind of guy who is willing to take a competition in mind and fight to try to be the starter and or willing to fight his way into a starting job. I think it's possible that we have seen the end of Cam Newton in the NFL, and if so, it is an incredible collapse of Cam Newton's career from 17-1 and NFL MVP, about to play against the Denver Broncos to try to win his first ever Super Bowl, to everything around him collapsing from purposes of him being a dominant player. It's wild. He's still relatively young, but he doesn't seem very healthy. He's now lost 8 straight games as a starter, and his tenure is over with his relationship, it appears, potentially over with the Carolina Panthers, and maybe his NFL career in jeopardy. Speaking of NFL careers, in the same day that Cam Newton is put on injured reserve, the Jacksonville Jaguars announced that Minshew Mania is over for now. Nick Foles will come back and take over the starting job for the Jacksonville Jaguars. After 9 games, I should say, or 8 3/4 games, because Nick Foles got hurt in the first quarter of the first game. Nick Foles comes back in and takes over in Jacksonville. This was a storyline that we debated last week. I really do believe that if Gardner Minshew had led the Jags to a win over the Texans, it's likely that he would have gotten to keep this job. Instead, they got whipped in London. It's now the bye week, and as a result, Minshew gets benched for Nick Foles to come back. Now, the real reason here that this probably happened is the Jacksonville Jaguars have $45 million committed and guaranteed to Nick Foles for the remainder of this year and for next year. I think it's likely that next year turns into a battle unless Nick Foles is incredible in the final 7 games of this season. And it's possible that the Jags are willing to just eat that Nick Foles salary next year if they have a legitimate battle in training camp to see who's going to be the quarterback going forward, Minshew or Nick Foles. But for now, Foles has come back in and taken back over as the Jags quarterback. We'll see how long that lasts. All right, I do this every single Tuesday. Top 5, bottom 5 in the NFL. Here are the 5 best teams in the NFL. I've got the 49ers as the best team in the NFL right now. I have got the Saints as the second best team in the NFL. Falling to third in the wake of their defeat on Sunday night, I've got the New England Patriots as the third best team in the NFL. Sliding in at the 4 spot, the Baltimore Ravens. Even though I'm not a believer in their ability to make a Super Bowl run, I try to adequately value every team objectively. And right now I've got the Ravens in the 4 spot. And then in the 5 spot, I have got the Seattle Seahawks. All right, the top 5 teams in order in the NFL, in my opinion: 49ers 1, Saints 2, Patriots 3, Ravens 4, Seahawks 5. That is my top 5. You can reject that top 5 and be furious in the comments if you are so desirous. And in the other 5, I have got the bottom 5, the list of sadness. The list of absolute sadness. I have got the Falcons at 28. I have got the Redskins at 29. I have got the Dolphins at 30. I've got the Jets at 31. And I have a new worst team in the NFL, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. Congratulations to Bengals fans. You are back in the running to have the number 1 overall pick. Again, the bottom 5: Falcons, Redskins, Dolphins, Jets, and Bengals in that order. All right. The Nats visited the White House yesterday, and I guess Suzuki wore a Make America Great Again hat, and people lost their mind on Twitter. The Blue Checkmark Brigade did. I guess a couple of players didn't go to the White House, but fortunately we didn't have to spend all of our time talking about who was going and who wasn't. I think the sports media might have finally moved on, but they were so triggered by Suzuki and a couple of other guys who endorsed Donald Trump. Here's the deal. I don't care who the president of the United States is. I have made this clear. I would go to the White House if I was invited. And if you go to the White House and you decide you want to wear a hat for the president, big deal. If a player had worn an Obama hat or an Obama t-shirt, nobody would have lost their mind. Players have the right at the White House to do basic things like this without being pilloried for it, okay? This isn't an incredibly difficult situation to analyze. This doesn't mean that every Nationals player endorses every decision that Donald Trump has made. It's a basic, to me, attempt by players to acknowledge some form of patriotism by going to the White House to meet the president. I would go to the White House to meet every president that has ever been elected in my lifetime. I think this idea that has taken root, which is, oh, I won't lend my name to the president by going, it basically died in the NBA. Because the NBA was fine lending their name to China, which, whatever you think about Donald Trump and the decisions he's made, they pale in comparison to the decisions that have been made in China. And so I applaud the Nats. Congrats on their championship, for going to the White House, for respecting the office of the presidency and the country by taking the opportunity to go visit the White House. This seems like a no-brainer. I would go to meet Obama. I would go to have met Bill Clinton. I would go to meet Ronald Reagan. I would go to meet Jimmy Carter. I would go to watch and meet all of these presidents. George W. Bush, George Bush Sr. We got to stop this idea that by shaking the president's hand, you somehow endorse every decision that the president has made. Vote for whoever you want to. Tell people you are voting for whoever you want to. But let's stop this ridiculous idea that by shaking the hand of the president, you are somehow endorsing every decision that the president makes. That is absolutely absurd. It makes no sense whatsoever in the larger context. The FSU job is open. The FSU job is open, and already players are trying to figure out what's going on. The recruiting class is a mess, but coaches are already cashing in. PJ Fleck has announced a 7-year extension agreement with Minnesota that keeps him all the way through 2026. Row the boat indeed. Interesting, PJ Fleck has Minnesota at 8-0 for the first time since 1941. All right, I want you to think about this for a minute. Minnesota has not started off a football season 8-0 since before Pearl Harbor was bombed. This weekend, huge game with Penn State coming to town. I like the Nittany Lions, by the way, but that is a wild story. Also a wild story already attributed to Florida State. There was a report that Bob Stoops, former national title winning coach Bob Stoops from Oklahoma, was poised to become the next Florida State Seminole head coach until it got shot down across the spectrum today from a variety of different commentators. Kirk Herbstreit was the first one I saw say, hey, I talked to Bob Stoops. This is a non-story. So, who makes sense for Florida State? I'll give you a couple of names that to me make sense. Let's take Stoops out of the equation since he said he's not going to do it, essentially. Let's take PJ Fleck out of the equation since he said he's not going to do it. To me, I think there are several guys that make sense, but I think the one that could be a home run that would be the riskiest hire is Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin going to Florida State from FAU would win at a high level. He'd be able to recruit. He already knows what it takes to win in the Southeast. You know he's a good offensive coordinator. I think he would fix a lot of what ails the Florida State Seminoles, okay? So I would jump all in on Lane Kiffin. But other names that I'm very confident in, Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, steal him away from another ACC program in Wake Forest, likely to have an impact. Given that you are competing with Clemson, would taking away Brent Venables from them make an impact in the Southeast and in the ACC? I think it's at least worth exploring. I think also there is an argument that Mark Stoops, who has been at Florida State before, could make a lot of sense at Florida State again. If he could win decently at Kentucky and build that program up, I think he could do a lot better at Florida State. Matt Campbell is the favorite right now. He's the Iowa State coach if you look at the odds market. I also think, put a little star by Hugh Freeze's name, they interviewed him to be offensive coordinator at Florida State. It could make sense to go there. Somebody just said Mark Stoops would be such a lateral hire. I don't really understand that. Do you mean that he's taking an equivalent job, or do you mean that he's very similar already to Willie Taggart, the guy that you already fired? I think that Mark Stoops has accomplished a lot more at Kentucky than what Willie Taggart had accomplished in a Power 5 conference at Florida State. I think it's a huge step up for Mark Stoops. I think the limiting factor there would be the offensive side of the ball, which has at times been iffy at Kentucky. And I'm not necessarily sold on Eddie Gran as offensive coordinator. But if he kept Kendall Briles and if he brought his own defense there, I think it could make a lot of sense. All right? So those are the candidates that I would put out there for Florida State that could make a lot of sense going forward. Josh Heupel also is an idea because he's at Central Florida. He followed Scott Frost. They've had decent success since. I don't like him as much because I'd be a little bit nervous that he's followed in Scott Frost's footsteps and he's trying to get out of Central Florida before the bottom falls out. Matt Rule would be an incredible hire from Baylor. I frankly don't see the point of having rebuilt Baylor and then suddenly jumping to Florida State. I think it would be a great hire for Florida State. If I'm Matt Rule and I want to leave for one of the best jobs in the NFL based on how good of a job I have done at Baylor in turning that program around in such a fast manner. I'm not sure that I want to bail on Baylor to go to another job where I have to rebuild, given the fact that I've got Baylor in some stability. I will also add again, James Franklin, I think it would not be doing the due diligence if they didn't reach out, meaning Florida State didn't reach out and try to talk to James Franklin. By the way, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but how about that Tennessee-Kentucky line moving 5 points? Kentucky opened a 4-point favorite against Tennessee this weekend for Saturday's game. The line has already moved all the way out to Tennessee -1. It's rare you see a line move like that. Final topic of the day. I don't know how many of you guys saw this, but The Chargers were rumored, according to a writer at The Athletic, to be going to London. The Chargers have turned their back on San Diego. They now play in a soccer stadium in LA that they can't sell out at all. And as a result, the only way they sell tickets is when the Steelers or the Packers or some other team comes to town and they take over the stadium in LA. And so last night, late, a report came out that the Chargers were willing and considering, if they were asked by the NFL, to move to London. That report, and as follows, this is a direct quote from Dean Spanos, the owner of the Chargers. It's total effing BS, okay? And he actually said the F word and the BS word. We're not going to London. We're not going anywhere. We're playing in Los Angeles. This is our home. This is where I'm planning to be for a long effing time, period. Well, that's great, but you just left from San Diego to move to LA, and no one in LA cares about you. You are the 9th or 10th most important team in all of Los Angeles, and people don't care about you there, and they don't want to buy tickets to your games, and the only way you sell tickets to your games is by other people deciding to buy them. Other teams deciding to buy them. It's an intriguing thought about what the future of this franchise is, because Dean Spanos has so badly bungled things, it's hard to believe it's going to make a big difference. Somebody said good luck with free agents playing in London. This is like, I don't want to go off on people who are stupid and jingoistic and don't understand the impact of playing in London. People will go play wherever the money is. I think it's possible that the NFL will have to adjust the salary cap to allow London team, whatever it is eventually, to pay more to take into account the cost of living and all of those other aspects. But people will go play in London. It's a great city to live in. It's not that far away. If you've ever been there, I would infinitely rather, like if you told me right now, Clay Travis, you can go right now and you can play in Minneapolis or you can play in London. Or Clay Travis, you can go live in Buffalo or you can go live in London. I would rather take my family and go live in London. Okay? That's if I were an NFL player. If you told me right now, Clay, you have to do radio for the next 5 years in one of these 3 cities, London, Minneapolis, or Buffalo, I would pick London in a heartbeat, and I would take my family over there, and it would be an easy decision to make. If you haven't ever been to London, then frankly, you sound like an idiot trying to talk about it. It's a phenomenal place to be, and it's a great jumping off point, as somebody just said, for being able to travel all over Europe. I would be ecstatic if you told me for the next several years I was going to be in London as opposed to Minneapolis or Buffalo or some of the other cities in the NFL that I wouldn't really have that much interest in actually living in compared to London. So I think that's a poor thought process. Not trying to take a shot at Buffalo or Minneapolis, but London dunks all over both of those cities. All right, I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. I will be on here shortly with Lock It In, 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain, 1:30 Pacific. Love all of you. Kisses, DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See y'all.